Here's a scary thought. What if the entire internet went down? Not in your house, not in your suburb, rather, what if the world's entire internet crashed? Now consider that 2.7 trillion US dollars essentially lives on the internet in the form of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, the world's largest crypto, alone has a tad under $1.2 trillion of market share with tens of millions of active holders. People like to tout Bitcoin as digital gold, a replacement as a reliable source of value. However, gold is tangible. It can be held. There are vaults full of gold across the world. Crypto exists digitally, which means it only exists if the internet exists. So how valid is this fear? Well, the good news is that the internet doesn't have one giant on-off switch. The internet, by definition, is an interconnected network of countless other networks. Therefore, the internet is almost indestructible. Even if multiple networks were to crash, so many backup systems exist which are activated instantly and automatically if other systems were to fail, that the internet is essentially bulletproof. That being said, the concept of the entire internet shutting down isn't impossible. Remember, the guys who built the Titanic thought she was indestructible. Well, try telling that to Jack, whose skeletal remains lie somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Seriously, there was extra room on that door, Rose. Anywho, it would take an inconceivable catastrophe, like a meteor hitting Earth, to destroy the entire internet, which at that point, getting onto Instagram to post a first-hand video of the said disaster should be the least of any survivors' worry, but of course there's always Addison Rae. In fact, there would be no survivors because in truth, for the internet to crash, it would take such a catastrophe that there would be no life remaining on the planet. Basically, Dinosaurs 2.0. So what would happen to crypto? Well, if computers were hypothetically unable to communicate with each other, this would be a slight inconvenience for cryptocurrencies as crypto networks distribute transactions on ledgers across countless computers in just one network. The good news there is, such an event would have no impact on the content of the ledgers in the respective blockchains. Once the problem was fixed, the contents of a person's crypto wallet would actually remain unaltered as the computers would verify copies of the register for consistency. So there you have it. In the event of a nuclear holocaust, cockroaches and crypto could be the great survivors, which could lead to an extremely wealthy race of insects. I need to stop watching Men in Black. Anywho, if you enjoyed the information contained in this video, then please make sure to like, share, subscribe to the channel, drop us a comment about what other crypto-related info you'd like us to break down, and of course, don't forget to press the bell icon to stay across the latest videos from Kalkine. For more information, just head across to the website, kalkinemedia.com. I'm James Preston, reporting for Kalkine.